Hello everyone, welcome back to My Hero Academia Podfic. This will be the continuation of Research to Rescue. This will be Part 4, Chapter 4, entitled, Hey, I kinda think you're cool, but also suspicious, so there's that. It was the middle of the night when Izuku finally placed the feeling of Hirayama's calm. Or, he at least analyzed it better anyways. It was the same calm he'd feel as a kid when he and his mom witnessed a hero fight while out shopping, or even in some interviews or news recordings. He was always excited to see the fight, but understood, and was comforted by, the fact that the hero would be the one to prevail in the end. The hero, reassuring and an overall calming presence, telling the people everything was under control. All Might was the biggest one to do this. Hirayama had that sort of feeling too, though it was on a smaller scale. Maybe that's why he decided to talk. It was only once, yeah, but still it was a comfort most, if not all, of dire members lacked. His mom used to have that kind of presence to him, too. It had been a very long time since Izuku had been near someone like that. Aizawa was getting nowhere with Rabbit, but the information he was getting was great, mostly because Ayane hung around him and wouldn't stop talking. He wasn't getting assassination missions, which was a relief. He was more suited to the stealth scene anyway. Tonight, however, he was told to go to Rabbit and get more information for his assignment. Rabbit? The guy hangs out in his room most of the time. It's on the 4th floor. His roommate, a man who only went by the name Crusher, explained when Aizawa told him when he needed to go. He's got a little sign next to his door. Honestly, if you miss it, you can't see for shit. Aizawa thanked Crusher and left for the room, carrying a small black backpack with the gear inside. He was advised to carry it with him for between base and job reasons. It definitely explained why Rabbit always seemed to have one. Aizawa definitely didn't miss the room. Though small, the sign was a green circle stuck to the wall. It stood out in the gross hospital-like hallway around it. Actually, no, a hospital had more character than this. The same hallway with the labs and the off-putting doors where Aizawa swore he heard people shouting for help. He had to tear himself away from the scene to keep his cover. He'd make note of it on the way to his assignment. There was also the unanswered question as to why Rabbit stayed on this floor. Multiple people had told him there was no actual dorms there, just the labs. That, and no one wanted to sleep so close to the technical team's workspace, even though what they actually did besides weapon design was a mystery. So his room being here was strange. Aizawa knocked on the sliding door and waited for it to open. Then he wondered if Rabbit was out on a job or maybe even asleep. It would be useless to come all this way to find out that the guy was gone. Breaking him from his thoughts, the door slid open and a figure stood there. "Did you need something?" Aizawa was then thrown into a whole other thought. When he looked at the unmasked Rabbit, he had dark green hair for one. It was messy and unkempt. Eyes bright green, yet underlined by bags and freckles, and possibly tired. What was visible of his arms were absolutely covered in scars, some old and others new. One cut through his right eyebrow, another on the left side of his jaw, and one more underneath his left eye. There might have been more hidden under the plain gray t-shirt. Oh, and the main kicker here? The Rabbit was a kid. Probably the same age of the incoming first years, Aizawa's own students. He had a vague suspicion about his age when it came to the voice, but seeing Rabbit like this proved it. The only other question was why a child was the infamous Rabbit. Where were his parents? Was he a runaway, or did his parents work with the Dyer as well? Aizawa kicked away the surprise, threatening to cross his face in order to keep a level voice. "I was supposed to ask about information on an assignment." Rabbit's eyes lit up, and he nodded. Then the kid waved his hand to invite him in. Aizawa was hesitant, but did so anyways, sitting on the edge of the bed when Rabbit gestured for him to. The room was colorful, much more than his own dorm, and meant for a single person. Though it was still small, almost like a former prison cell, the small square in the door with the bars on it did not get rid of that feeling either. A newscast was paused on the TV, showing a replay of a hero fight from that morning, the one between some villain and Endeavor. Still, the colors in the room made it not so plain and a little easier to look at. The kid crossed to the desk and picked up a notebook from the back. Aizawa noted that there was another lying open on the desk, a different notebook that was dropped on top of it as if to hide the one underneath. Rabbit crossed back over to Aizawa, and he leaned back on the dresser opposite him, opening the notebook and flipping through the pages. There was an air of unease around him, but that was to be expected when a stranger came into your room asking for information. "Cora told me someone was bugging Present Mike's agency, so I should give you the basics on the hero and his office." Aizawa was about to say he knew about the hero already when Rabbit turned the notebook around and held it out to him. Aizawa glanced at it and took the offering, staring at the page in silent awe. It was a detailed analysis of the voice hero, even his last name Yamada, though thankfully there was nothing else involving his personal life other than he went to, graduated from, and taught at UA. Still, the amount of information was incredible, detailed, though not entirely accurate. A few tiny pieces looked more like oddly worded truth that could be taken wrong if no one was looking. Kid, what is this? Aizawa's voice was flat, but he knew exactly what it was. But Rabbit needed to say it out loud so the recorder could hear. Rabbit paused for a moment and then spoke. I analyzed heroes for Hisashi and the other Dire members. Anyway, President Mike isn't usually at his office this late. It's about... Rabbit glanced at the clock next to the bed. 9 o'clock now? But there's been a few reports that he's been working late the last week or so. From what I got from Cora, you need to put bugs near the middle of the room, in houseplants, and at Mike's actual desk, so you'll have to break in. Aizawa, who was nodding slowly and glanced between the pages at the kid. Who's Hisashi? Ah, Midoriya Hisashi, the boss? Aizawa looked at the Rabbit and nodded. Why would Rabbit so openly use Midoriya's first name when everyone else said his surname like it was the only thing they could use? Could have been a rank thing, sure. Something told Aizawa that it wasn't exactly it. He kept going with the spiel, though. The scout said that the windows on the floor where the agency are alarmed, but the ones above it aren't. The what? Scout? Rabbit looked at him for a moment with an unreadable expression, then launched into a quick explanation. Well, we have a few scouts that go out to certain buildings belonging to contacts, target sites, heroes, and whatnot. They mark out hero patrols, and times too, though their information isn't always correct. Know from experience? Aizawa said this as a form of joke, but it delivered flat. Rabbit just shrugged. Almost got me caught in November. Lied about a service door in a nightclub. Had to jump off the banister to get out. Ended up being chased down by heroes. Eraserhead and President Mike. It was in the news. I saw on the news. Interesting fight. How'd you move the fire? Rabbit looked a bit nervous about the fight, or maybe it was the question about his tactics. He answered anyways. Quirk? What's yours? The tone was more, tell me because I need to know, than casual back-and-forth conversation. I can stop a person's quirk temporarily. If Rabbit had any sort of thought about this, he didn't let it show. He only hummed and walked over to the desk to start scribbling on a piece of paper, muttering softly to himself. What are you doing? Rabbit didn't look back when he said, I sometimes help people with strategies suited to their quirks in case that they run into the heroes while on a job. You have a higher risk of running into one, so a backup plan would be helpful, right? Aizawa gave a quick, oh, right, nod, and went back to the page on President Mike in the notebook. Then he flipped through the pages idly, looking at all the heroes listed. It was unnerving. A glance up at the bookshelf found a whole line of worn-down notebooks, probably holding even more profiles. He wondered if there was one on him. Maybe not. He hoped not. While he zoned out, Rabbit made a small noise and stood up straight. He turned back to Aizawa with a fairly small yet proud smile on his face. All right, so here's what you could probably do if you run into any of the heroes. Aizawa had left the conversation with Rabbit feeling informed, impressed, and strange, like the kid had tried to read him like a book and only got through 4 out-of-order chapters before he left. He certainly looked more suspicious when Aizawa went to leave than he had when Aizawa showed up. The gears in his teenage head were obviously turning. Though he did go through with the mission with almost 0 problems. In fact, it seemed like there were many on purpose, and 3 on patrol in the area somehow did a few routine things wrong. Tsukuchi or Hisashi must have done something to let this job go smoothly this time, an action both hated and appreciated. So he was sitting on top of a rooftop 3 miles away after finishing bugging the agency way too quickly, one leg propped up on a ledge and his elbow draped over it. The small bag with the goggles, tie, and weapons sat next to him. Tsukuchi, Aizawa said out loud. There was no one that was actually going to hear other than the watch. Try and comb for information on Midoriya Hisashi, and get hero agencies to sweep their offices sometime this week. I have a feeling there's been jobs like this before. There wasn't an answer. Aizawa sat on the rooftop in peace a little longer, though, giving him quiet time to think. Aizawa expected the Rabbit to be some harsh, no-nonsense killer, not a kid who just got nervous over one conversation. Maybe he should take a little more time to actually get to know the kid. Perhaps he'd get information Tsukuchi needed, and the information Aizawa wants. Something was definitely up with Hirayama, though Izuku couldn't exactly figure out what. He's read a lot of people that came through the Dyer's ranks over the years. He's been able to see them and profiled them, as many as he could. Some of them were just criminals, others flat-out villains. A few of them were ex-pro heroes or heroes in training who switched teams for one reason or another. In short, he's mapped out which ones he'd rather avoid and which ones would be an inconvenience to be stuck with. Hirayama fit exactly none of those categories. He looked surprised when Izuku said scouts, like he didn't expect the Dyer to have resources to do it. There was even that subtle why expression in his face when Izuku recounted the mission to bug a hero office. Maybe Izuku was reading too much into this. He was pretty tired. Either way, he had work to do. So once Hirayama left, he sat back at his desk and pushed the decoy notebook off the Dyer analysis notebook, then went back to writing about things he overheard during lunch that day. It's not that he's difficult to analyze, it's just that it's really complicated to get any details without interviewing him, and he's retired, so there's no info to get from him anymore. Rabbit said in a half-exhausted, half-enthusiastic tone, hands hovering over the table where they'd paused after his sentence. Aizawa had been left to his own devices by Ayane and Ryunosuke only 2 days after the mission by bugging Mike's office, which, to keep count, was only his third official job. Rabbit took the empty seat. The day after, when he spotted Aizawa on his own, the company was mutually appreciated in silence, and right now, 2 weeks later, there was even conversation. Currently, the kid was explaining a hero analysis Midoriya assigned him to. Aizawa wasn't going to interrupt him either. Rabbit was recounting what he could figure out online and through news, and then throwing theories as to the workings of the hero's quirk. He needed somewhere to throw ideas and sort his head, and Aizawa didn't mind being the silent person to listen. It didn't help that Aizawa strongly believed that Rabbit didn't get many chances to talk in the first place either, probably forming the muttering habit seen earlier. Being a teacher, this felt completely and totally wrong. He could internally go on a 2-hour-long spiel about exactly why this was a problem, but that felt exhausting to do right now. Maybe it's touch-activated, like, I don't know. He's got to touch the electronics to get them to work either way, but it's a one touch and they work, or does he have to keep holding it? And is it on a timer? I saw this one video where he had held a batch of, 3 drones. He had the controllers in one hand, I think, but he had it for a solid 10 minutes before the robber was down. Despite his tired and almost sluggish movements, there was still an enthusiastic way the kid had moved his hands. Maybe, was Aizawa's short answer. The single word still got Rabbit to momentarily wear a small, satisfied smile and nod. There were a few moments of silence until Aizawa asked, "Any missions today?" Rabbit sighed and poked at what looked like mashed potatoes. "Not really. Hisashi hasn't given me anything all week. He wants me to analyze this guy first." The kid shrugged. "The less I have, the better." Aizawa raised an eyebrow. "Do you not like working here?" The expression across Rabbit's face was a mixture of shocked, worried, and self-loathing, like he said something he shouldn't have, an expression Aizawa wasn't expecting from the kid. Rabbit glanced around without moving his head before finally looking back at Aizawa. "It's not that, it's just—" Aizawa knew that tone. That was the tone of a child caught doing something wrong and lying through their teeth to backpedal out of the situation. "I don't really like the jobs I get, so Rabbit was obviously flailing, and finding any words, and eventually dropped his hands with a sigh. "Yeah, I don't." Aizawa slowly nodded and casually pointed his fork in the kid's direction. "Is it the pay keeping you here?" Rabbit tiredly shrugged. "Something like that." Debunking that entire piece of conversation would take time, but one thing Aizawa honed in on was Rabbit's immediate panic to the question, and the dismissive answer at the end. Rabbit knocked that train of thought off by putting a hand down hard on the table. "You know what I heard from Hisashi this morning?" It was an obvious topic switch, but Aizawa took it by saying a soft no. Rabbit leaned closer, leaning on crossed arms. He glanced around. People were leaving at this point, and their little area was void of anyone interested in listening to their conversation. Apparently, the police put out this new protocol for hero agencies after someone in Best Genus Agency found one of the bugs in a dead houseplant. They're going to sweep for bugs weekly. Aizawa was relieved that Tsukuchi had done something about the bug problem. Hisashi is livid. The info to plan around and have is cut, and Core is worried about the moles that we have stationed in the pro circuit. "There's moles?" Bugs at this point were to be expected, but the Dire really has enough connections to have moles in the pro-hero circuit? Was it blackmail? Did unknown villains go undercover in the hero ranks? The idea was ludicrous. Well, so was getting a hero to go undercover in a villain group. Aizawa dropped that thought. Rabbit shrugged and stopped leaning on his arms. As far as I know, there's at least 6 in the area that are around the sub-bases. They aren't big-name heroes, mostly sidekicks, because they don't get a lot of attention. It's been about 3 years since Korra sent them out. There could be more, but I don't know how many. Aizawa was slowly nodding at this. It was certainly something new. Izuku's running theory that Hirayama wasn't what he seemed was going strong at this point. How he seemed genuinely interested in the moles that the Dire had planted was a tick-off. Not like the semi-attentive listening he'd been doing when Izuku fell into his ramble about a hero assignment. Now that he thought about it, Hirayama was always interested in the ways the Dire works or the learning names of people he'd hopefully never meet. He was just interested in learning things. In the little time they actually talked, Hirayama taught Izuku some stuff too, like how to give a better kick or some random fact about history or the like an actual teacher. Maybe Hirayama was a mole himself. No, that was a stupid theory. Heroes wouldn't put one of their own in a powerful group of villains, would they? The idea was ridiculous. So was the idea of making a villain a hero's sidekick. All right, so maybe it wasn't stupid. But as nice as Hirayama was, he couldn't be a mole. The evidence to prove this? Well, Izuku didn't have any. He didn't have any to prove he was either. Izuku was probably overthinking the little things at this point. He should probably just get some sleep and put his crazy theories to bed, too. Maybe 3 days after dismissing the mole theory, Izuku was just walking to the site of his next job. For him, it was nice to actually be out in the sun, even if it was just going to set a few hours. The late afternoon was cold, and he had to pull his hood up for more warmth than to protect his identity, and put on a second long-sleeve shirt underneath the suit and gray hood before leaving the base. He at least had the news to tell him that it was forecast for the day, and he didn't have to go back inside to change before he was gone. He adjusted his backpack inside. Normally he'd take the train. It was somewhat warmer than this, but the line he needed was down for track maintenance. It would be faster to take a different one as soon as he could to the close spot as possible and just walk to where he needed to be. So he did, looking over one of his notebooks as he did. It wouldn't be suspicious, really. "I'm taking notes on heroes so I can become one," he would tell anyone who asked. Plus, if he saw one, he could get good first-hand information. He walked right under a bridge while looking at the last filled-in page near the middle of the book. He paused for a moment mid-step. Something was wrong. He couldn't place what exactly. Someone was looking at him, but who? Where? He was the only one. A body to hide in. Perfect. There wasn't enough time to book it as something broke through a sewer grate and grabbed his leg. His notebook dropped somewhere. Then he couldn't breathe. There was something heavy around his throat, in his throat, that he desperately tried and failed at clawing away. He could feel the smoke on the back of his throat getting stuck with no way to get out. "Stop struggling, kid. I'm just hijacking your body. It'll only be a second," said the voice. No, said the villain. Izuku couldn't reach into his backpack for rocks or his knife. He couldn't reach his lighter either. He couldn't breathe. The smoke in his throat felt warmer, bordering on hot. Could he burn this guy? Maybe. He was probably some sort of liquid, but still. There wasn't enough air to think up a solid plan. Black spots dancing across the corners of his eyes. He was going to die there. To a villain he didn't know. Probably a petty thief running from a hero like Kamui Woods or Present Mike. Maybe death for someone like him wouldn't be too bad. "Fear not," a loud, authoritative voice shouted. It was familiar. Too familiar. Someone burst up from the sewer gate, launching the metal upwards. It landed not far away with a clang, but in its place was the hero Izuku could never forget, even after those few years with the tech team. "For I am here." A loud shout in English, followed by a signature smash, sent the liquid guy into droplets with a shock wave, throwing Izuku back into the wall and away from the threat. He was out for maybe a minute when he woke up to All Might trying to wake him up. Izuku was up immediately, though, coughing out excess smoke. It was dark gray, almost black. "Excellent, you're all right," said the hero with a relieved tone. Izuku sat up and coughed again. One fist held up to his mouth. All Might ran a hand through his long blonde hair, and Izuku's mind was running. All Might. A hero. Ask him for help. Sorry for getting you caught up in that, young man. It was a mistake on my end. All Might pulled a plastic bottle from the bag in one hand, a grocery store bag with 2 other bottles of something and what looked like potatoes and leeks, though inside the bottle was green sludge. Izuku saw 2 eyes pressed to the side. The villain. He can help get people to destroy the Dire. Either way, thanks to you, I've caught the villain. All Might stuffed the villain cola in the bag and seemed to crouch just outside the bridge. You can get him to keep Mom safe. Izuku held out a hand and said a weak, Wait. Do it. All Might stopped and looked back at the boy, standing straight again. What is it, my boy? Do it. Izuku's eyes watered. Maybe it was the smoke. No, there wasn't any more, just the bitter taste of blood on the back of his tongue. All Might looked at Izuku dead on, though the characteristic smile made it hard to read his expression. Izuku reaches with his other hand to pick up the notebook. Ask for his help. Oh, an autograph. You'll see there's already one for you. Izuku shook his head and stood up. Hisashi wouldn't know it was you. His eyes were watering again. It's your only chance. Was he crying? He shouldn't be. He couldn't be. All Might turned more to face the boy completely. Save Mom. Thank you, Izuku said simply. He couldn't do it. Hisashi would find out. He always finds out. It was breaking his part of the deal. Inka would get hurt. She didn't deserve to be hurt. All Might nodded. It was nothing, but a hero not only battles enemies, but time. I must turn this villain over to the authorities at once. The hero turned and crouched again. Until next time, young man. Then he was gone, and Izuku was left standing there with his hood down, staring up at where his icon leapt into the sky. He looked at the empty page in his notebook. Only over 2 whole pages were there the words that made up the hero's name. All Might. Izuku wipes his eyes, stuffed the notebook back into his backpack, and started walking. He coughed into his sleeve and found red. He'd have to replace the jacket, or maybe it could pass as a paint stain. Wiping the blood off the corner of his mouth with his sleeve, he kept walking. He couldn't be late for work. All right, everyone, this concludes Chapter 4 of Research to Rescue. Chapter 5 will be next, and as always, thank you all so much for listening.